Now, Senator Bernie Sanders recently got a chance to question Betsy DeVos. Now, Betsy DeVos is, of course, Donald Trump's choice for the Secretary of Education. So she'll lead the Department of Education if she gets confirmed. Now, Betsy DeVos, hey, she's super rich. Look, I don't have a problem with that. Okay. Now, the DeVos family, now they are, well, they hold a big place here in Michigan. They're pretty famous. Why? It's because, well, Amway. Amway was a pretty big employer here in the state, and you can't go anywhere without seeing a DeVos something, some place that they've given charitable donations to. So, look, as I said, in Michigan, this family is well known for being very, very rich and very influential. Now, no surprise, they're also very, very conservative. In fact, Betsy DeVos herself has led the charge in getting public funding for private schools, for charter schools. Now, the problem with charter schools, and there are many, but one of the problems is it's going to take money away from public schools. That's not a good thing. And also, charter schools don't really have a record of being better at making children more proficient at things like reading, math, and science than a public school does. And yet they do so at a higher cost with less insight. Of course, because it's a for-profit school. Again, I don't have an issue with charter schools themselves, but when you start taking money away from public education and funneling into these for-profit entities, then I have an issue with it. And it's amazing because, you know, if these charter schools were great, were fantastic, they wouldn't need public money to continue functioning. They would be fine. They would be doing so well that people would be like falling over themselves to enroll their kids. But anyway, so look, the DeVos family has, of course, as I said, they're very conservative, and they have donated a lot of money, I should say, to the Republican Party, as well as different conservative causes, some anti-gay causes, obviously charter schools, et cetera, et cetera. Now, so let's go to the confirmation hearing. Recently, Bernie Sanders got an opportunity to ask her a few questions. Now, and what he did is that he did essentially what we expected him to do. He took her to task over money in politics. Let's take a look at that video.
My question is, and I don't mean to be rude, but do you think if you were not a multi-billionaire, if your family has not made hundreds of millions of dollars of contributions to the Republican Party, that you would be sitting here today?
Senator, as a matter of fact, I do think that there would be that possibility. I've worked very hard on behalf of parents and children for the last almost 30 years to be a voice for parents and to voice for students and to empower parents to make decisions on behalf of their children, primarily low-income children.
Okay, so that's your answer. Oh, yeah, well, I've been working on behalf of kids, so, you know, yeah, because Republicans care so much about children, unless, of course, they're unborn. Now, let me translate what she was saying. I've been working very, very hard for the corporations. Okay. I've been working very, very hard to destroy public education. I've been working very hard to put God back in schools, and charter schools right now are the best way of destroying public education and doing just that. So, there we go. You don't believe me? In a 2001 interview for something called The Gathering, which is a group focused on advancing the Christian faith through philanthropy, through charitable giving, she and her husband, Dick DeVos, were asked whether or not Christian schools should continue to rely on just philanthropic dollars, basically donations from people like her and Dick DeVos, rather than, of course, pushing for taxpayer money through vouchers. Now, Betsy DeVos had replied, quote, "There are not enough philanthropic dollars in America to fund what is currently the need in education versus what is currently being spent every year on education in this country. Our desire is to confront the culture in ways that will continue to advance God's kingdom." And of course, that includes taking public money and putting it into private schools, shutting down public schools so that, oh, look, you've got nowhere to go, nowhere to send your kids. So you're going to have to send them to this religious private school. If that doesn't concern you, if you're okay with getting some religion in your education, okay, that's fine. Now, the state of education here in Michigan, and some of these charter schools should concern you. Now, the Washington Post actually wrote a great article on this, giving examples of some pretty bad charter schools in my home state. Now, they write, in Brightmoor, the only high school left is Detroit Community Schools, which is a charter school boasting more than a decade of abysmal test scores, and until recently a superintendent that earned a $130,000 salary a year despite a dearth of educational experience or credentials. So basically, it's almost like Trump University. What this charter school is. Very, very overpaid people in positions where they don't have the training necessary to actually do those positions. Fantastic. Great. Another example. On the west side, another charter school, Hope Academy, has been serving the community for around Grand River and Livernois for 20 years. Its test scores have been among the lowest in the state throughout those 2 decades. In 2013, the school ranked in the first percentile. First percentile, that's not a good thing. That is the absolute bottom for academic performance. Despite that, its charter was still renewed. Oh boy, your school sucks. You are doing terrible when it comes to test scores. Let's renew your charter. Again, we have a Republican legislature here in Michigan. So they're like, you're making students dumber? Well, that's good. That helps us out. Rubber stamp, approved. Continue. Good job. Or, here's another example. Woodward Academy. Now, Woodward Academy, that is a charter school that in the Washington Post, they write, that has limped along near the bottom of school achievement since 1998, while its operator has been allowed to expand in other communities. Again, poor test scores, poor academic achievement for its students, and the Republican legislature here in Michigan says, oh, great work, continue. In fact, spread out to other communities. Nice. Now look, those are a few examples from around the state. I'm not saying that old charter schools operate this poorly. I'm not. There are actually some good charter schools. However, there are a lot of them that do suck. Why? It's because there's little oversight. And because DeVos and the rest of the Republican Party, well, they want to continue giving tax dollars to these failing private schools. So, and look, public schools have some issues. Obviously, there needs to be some education reform. But private schools don't necessarily seem to be the entire answer. I'm not against the existence of private schools, but don't take public money to fund them. That's all I'm trying to say. Now, again, this is the fault of people like Betsy DeVos, who buy the politicians, funnel money to these charter schools, and what she gets in return is she not only gets to build God's kingdom with public money, but she also gets picked for positions of power because of how much money she's given to the Republican Party. And that's essentially pretty likely the reason why she was picked for this position in the first place. She never taught in a school environment. She never attended a public school. She never even sent her kids to a public school. She has absolutely zero experience. She is not qualified. But again, that fits a lot of the Trump appointees. They're not qualified in the positions that they're going to be put in. No idea. She has no idea what she's doing. She was picked, and that's the reason she was picked too. Another reason. She was picked not to run it, but to run it into the ground. And that's the whole idea. She wants to destroy public education like the rest of the Republicans. And the reason is they want ignorant, obedient workers. People that won't fight for higher wages. People that are just smart enough to run the machines, but dumb enough not to ask questions and not to fight back. And this is all why DeVos and the other Republicans, they get richer and they ended up turning this country into a Christian Saudi Arabia. That's what they want to do. They're fundamentalists. So look, Sanders' question was a good question and really addressed the elephant in the room. And that is, of course, money in politics. Without money in politics, these people would not have the money to fund the politicians that will destroy public education. They would actually have to be accountable to the people. The people would vote on the policies. And besides, without money in politics, it's very likely DeVos wouldn't have even been considered to run the Department of Education. In fact, I don't think most of Trump's picks would be here. The 6 Goldman Sachs guys that he put on, Rex Tillerson, they would not be here. It's likely that Trump might not be president either, because he ran on anti-corruption. He ran on draining the swamp. Well, the swamp had to have been filled in the first place to want to drain it, right? And this money, this flood of money that's been pouring into our electoral system, into our politics, it creates the conditions of a swamp. It gets pretty swampy in there when you've got all that money, all these special interests, all these large corporations that are essentially writing laws that these politicians will just rubber stamp and pass. That's who they work for. They work for the large corporations, for the special interests, for those who can afford to buy them. If poor people could buy them, they probably would, and we would actually have good policy towards poor people. But again, poor people are poor. They don't have the money to purchase politicians. And that's one of the big problems here. And this just shows that Donald Trump, by the way, who chose Betsy DeVos, he's giving out favors to people who support him, to his donors, and as well as Republican Party donors. If you thought he was going to be any different than Hillary Clinton on this, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you think he's different, you're deluding yourself. He's a different side of the same corrupt coin, and there's more than enough proof to show it. And unfortunately, Bernie Sanders, he's the only one that is actually going out and asking these types of questions and addressing that giant elephant in the room. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent, non-corporate media, go to our Patreon page and become a patron. Patreon.com/TYTNation.